Archon is one of the 6 base game secret archetypes in Remnant 2. It's a class all about boosting mods and shielding or buffing your team. Whenever you want to dedicate yourself to mods, the Archon is usually your best bet. Reality Rune is the Archon starting skill. On cast, it creates a scalable 7 meter wide bubble that applies the slow debuff to enemies and massively slows their projectiles. Players standing inside the bubble are granted 25% damage reduction and generate 50 mod power to both weapons per second. The bubble lasts for 15 seconds and then goes on cooldown for 75. This skill is a powerful defensive and utility ability. It's similar to Veil of the Black Tear from the first game, but without the full-on projectile blocking. Slowing enemies and their projectiles is still very useful, and the damage reduction bonus matches that of Stone Skin from Alchemist. It does only last 15 seconds though, so you'll definitely want to save it for the right time, be it for reviving a friend, bunkering for a strong attack, or when your mods need a recharge. That passive mod regen when inside the bubble is really good, granting 750 mod power over its duration. Combined with Spirit and other mod power generation sources, you can easily refill both your mods in no time. Whichever way you use it, Reality Rune will serve you well. At level 5, the Archon unlocks Chaos Gate. On cast, it creates a scalable 7 meter wide aura that gives players who stand within it stacks of unbridled chaos. These stacks increase your total damage dealt and taken by 0.7% and 0.3% respectively. They stack up to 50 times and are lost over time when outside the aura. At its peak, it grants 35% more damage and 15% more damage taken. Having any number of stacks increases your mod power generation by 10%. The skill lasts for 20 seconds and then goes on cooldown for a staggering 85. Chaos Gate is a nice risk-reward option for the Archon and their team. You're effectively gaining an archetype's worth of extra damage at the cost of a slight hit to your defenses. As I have brought up numerous times with Bisected Ring, a 15% DR penalty really isn't that bad. Bark Skin alone drops that penalty to just 5%. Toss in another source of DR and you're all set. The fact it gives all damage makes it a very flexible skill to run with Archon in the subslot, especially since it buffs your allies as well. The stack straining over time also gives the user some parting strength after its duration ends, unlike most skills which lose all of their effects immediately. When you want to squeeze out even more damage from Archon, you really can't go wrong with Chaos Gate. Havoc Form is the Archon's level 10 skill. On activation, you'll begin hovering above the ground. For 30 seconds, you'll gain a selection of new abilities that each cost time to use. Once the timer ends, the skill goes on cooldown for 90 seconds. If you cancel the ability early, you'll be refunded a portion of the skill's cooldown. There's a bit more to the refund than that, but we'll come back to it later. For now, let's continue. Your primary attack button shoots lightning tendrils that deal 38 to 114 shock damage roughly every 0.231 seconds. These tendrils arc to nearby targets like Enigma, although in this case there doesn't appear to be any limit to the number of additional enemies targeted. This attack has a max reach of 15 meters, and while the tendrils don't scale with amplitude, their ability to chain to every nearby enemy makes Havoc Form one of the best crowd clearing tools in the entire game, especially since it doesn't deal any team damage. Holding down the fire button will drain the ability's time by an additional 0.2125 seconds per tendril fired. Maybe. These are the values listed internally for all 3 skills. The other 2 make sense and track fairly well when watching the counter. However, the tendrils have an odd number, and it's hard to tell how much of an effect cast speed is having on the time cost, if any. All you need to know is that holding down the fire button drains the timer faster. Cast speed also increases the rate at which you deal damage with the tendrils. The skill card's damage even updates when increasing it. Holding down the aim button when in Havoc Form creates a scalable 3 meter bubble that increases the damage reduction of all allies within it by a whopping 50%. Holding the shield slows you down and drains an additional second from the timer every second it's deployed. This shield can be a fantastic way of protecting your friends, and although you can just hold it down to give the damage reduction for an extended period, you can totally just tap the button to sort of parry attacks. I don't know how much latency affects this skill, so maybe commit to holding it down if you're playing with someone with a shoddy connection. Dodging while in Havoc Form causes you to blink in whatever direction you would with a regular dodge. Just like Wormhole, you are completely invulnerable for the duration of the teleport. Upon reaching your destination, you'll emit a scalable 5 meter shock blast that deals 300 shock damage. These blinks cost 1.5 seconds per use. Evade speed and distance buffs have no bearing on this dodge, but considering how powerful it is, I think it's fair. Before we move on, I want to throw in a few more details about Havoc Form and go into why that cooldown refund is a little wacky. First off is that when you're not attacking or blocking, you'll emit a small non-scalable shock damage aura that deals 53 damage per tick. This is basically nothing, as if something is that close to you, you'll just lightning tendril them anyways, which disables the shock aura. Secondly is that movement speed sources do affect how fast you move around in Havoc Form. Not the most important thing to note, but it can help when clearing dungeons or playing boss rush. And lastly is that cooldown refund. Now you would think that it's just a simple percentage based refund, but in reality it's far more jank. It turns out that the amount of cooldown refunded when ending the skill is actually based on Havoc Form's total duration. What this means is that the more duration you have when cancelling it, the more of a flat refund you'll get back. Since it's not percentage based, this means we can refund the entire skill if we stack enough duration and cooldown sources. Now you're probably thinking, what's the point of doing that? As it turns out, there's actually a bug with this refund mechanic that was never patched. If we activate the skill and then manually cancel it, every subsequent use after not manually cancelling it will still give us the refund. Now you see where this is going. By stacking enough cooldown and duration, we can achieve unlimited uptime with Havoc Form. That means unlimited shielding, unlimited safe blinks, and unlimited crowd control. Overall, Havoc Form is pretty busted despite being nerfed. Moving on to perks, the Archon's damage perk is Amplify. It increases mod damage by 5% per level, up to 50% at level 10. At level 6, it also increases mod crit chance by 10%. I'm genuinely shocked the crit chance value was never nerfed like all the other archetype damage perks back in the day. It's by far one of the strongest, albeit focused, damage perks in the game. It being purely mod damage does mean that if you're running the archetype, you're going to be running mods, unless you're just using it for Havoc Form. Power Creep is the Archon's team perk. Upon casting a mod, 10% of its cost will be generated to all allies over 10 seconds. At level 7, it also gives all allies 10% increased mod generation during the effect. This is just a nice little boost that helps you and your team get your mods up a little bit sooner. Sadly, this functions identically to the feedback mutator, in that active mods don't benefit from it. If you want to best utilize the perk, then just stick with non-active ones. The Archon's utility perk is Spirit Within. It decreases the cost of mods per charge by 5%, increasing to 10% at level 8. Just like the team perk, this helps with mod uptime, although it does have some negative synergy with sources that need you to spend large bulks of mod power like Spirit Wisp Amulet. A bullet mod's cost going from 1250 to 1125 loses you a quarter of the cooldown reduction you would have gotten without the perk, and you can't turn this off, unless you run Lamir Sensor, which cancels out the bonus. Power Leak is the Archon's Relic perk. It grants both weapon mods 100 mod power on relic use. At level 9, it grants 100 additional mod power to whatever weapon is currently held in hand. This perk is just more of the same as the last two, although I kinda wish they never nerfed the perk from its original values. It's not bad, but you can just get the same if not more mod power by just shooting targets. It's especially weird that this change was made in the same patch that reworked Archon's Prime perk. Back when Archon had double mod power generation, it was understandable that this perk was very strong. But now that Tempest is focused on passive mod regen, it really doesn't make a lot of sense why they felt the need to nerf Power Leak. Overall, it's not terrible, but it's definitely on the weaker side of relic perks. Finally, we have the Archon's Prime perk, Tempest. When Archon is your prime archetype, you gain 5 to 15 passive mod regen per second depending on your archetype level. Casting a mod doubles this value for 10 seconds. 30 passive mod regen is pretty good. Yes, the original was stronger, but I actually like the regen better. Even the passive isn't too shabby. When combined with Insight, Spirit, and all the other sources of mod generation, you can very easily recharge mods in no time. There is one part of the perk that is not mentioned anywhere though, and like so many perks with hidden effects I've discussed so far, I can't believe Gunfire never wrote it down. When Archon is your prime archetype, passive mod regen leaks into active mods. It's kind of like leaking gemstones effect, but only with passive mod generation. This allows you to permaloop active mods with enough mod regen and generation bonuses. You can use leaking gemstone with Tempest, but there's no extra mod power gained from the regen sources with it equipped. Tempest seems to override it completely in that regard. So yeah, Tempest is still really good despite it being changed. Whether the unwritten part is intended or not is unknown. Flashcaster is the Archon's trait. It increases mod and skill cast speed by 5% per level, maxing out at 50% at level 10. This trait does wonders for a ton of skills, allowing you to become actionable much sooner after casting them. For mods though, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Some mods definitely benefit from having it, although many of them are just toggle and fire mods, which can be swapped back to regular fire mode by just tapping the mod button again after shooting them. It is worth having for mods that lock you in their cast animation though. I've personally gotten myself killed a ton of times by getting hit in the middle of activating bullet mods, since you can't dodge while casting them. Overall, it's definitely a lot more noticeable with skills and archetype effects, especially with sources like Die Hard, Rampage, Redemption, etc. For Reality Rune setup, I wanted to build around the Bubbles mod regen. Hunter's Mark Hunter was my secondary archetype. My trinkets were Kinetic Shield Exchanger, Shard Banded Ring, Burden of the Sciolist, Digested Hog Lure, and Jewel of the Beholden. For weapons, I went with the Widowmaker with Corrosive Rounds and Feedback, and the Repeater Pistol with Hotshot and Bullet Weaver. Shielded Heart was my relic of choice, and my fragments were Mod Crit Chance, Range Crit Chance, and Crit Damage. For traits, be sure to pick up Insight, Chakra, Siphoner, and Leech. The idea with this build is to use Reality Rune's chunky mod regen to boost the mod power gained during our bullet mod duration. It's honestly very overkill. A Fairy Needle and a little more mod generation bonus would be all you need to achieve permanent bullet mod uptime with this setup. That being said, we do still have the skill's defensive benefits to fall back on if anything gets too close. Unlike your typical range setup with dual bullet mods, this build can actually function with both mods being active at the same time. Not that there's any inherent reason why you'd want to do that in this setup, but if you were to swap out some trinkets, you could benefit from sources that require chunks of mod power to be spent to proc more often, like Spirit Wisp Amulet, Spirit Healer, etc. One thing I have to bring up when discussing Reality Rune is that it's far from perfect. Some projectiles just pass right through it like it's not even there. From the few fights I recorded, it was mostly fine, but the blue splashy orbs in Shahala's fight were completely unaffected. Keep that in mind when running the skill. Besides that, Reality Rune is still pretty good. Chaos Gate is usually my go-to scale whenever I run Archon. In this case, I ran an explosive mod setup utilizing the mod leak from Tempest and Feedback, as well as Reed of the Vaunt to give Prismatic Driver nearly unlimited uptime. My secondary archetype was Summoner. Summon choice is up to you. Since I'm running explosives, they're gonna get wrecked within seconds, so it doesn't really matter. My trinkets were Reed of the Vaunt, Burden of the Gambler, Braided Thorns, Akari Warband, and Probability Cord. My weapons were the Bone Saw with Prismatic Driver and Feedback, and Nebula with Maelstrom. Relic choice is up to you, and my fragments were Mod Crit Chance, Crit Damage, and Explosive Damage. Make sure to pick up Fortify and Bark Skin to counteract the penalty from Chaos Gate. Chaos Gate is fairly incidental in this build. We're already getting a massive boost to Prismatic Driver, but it doesn't hurt to get some more. If I were playing with friends, this bonus would be even more impactful. I don't really have a ton to say about the skill. It's very straightforward. The stacks draining slowly does allow you to leave the zone if you need to reposition, which in this game happens pretty often, unless you're running a face tank setup. If you stack enough cooldown sources, you could potentially maintain some stacks before the skill comes back. It's just a really good pick for the archetype, especially if you want to run more than just mods. For Havoc Form setup, you know I had to build around that refund bug. Way of Kayula Invoker was my secondary archetype, and my trinkets were Legacy Protocol, Burden of the Stargazer, Burden of the Rebel, Kinetic Cyclestone, and Crimson Dreamstone. For weapons, I ran a gun with Heatwave and Harmonizer, and Corrupted Rune Pistol with Time Weave. Profane Heart is my recommended relic pick, and my fragments were Skill Crit Chance, Cast Speed, and Skill Damage. For traits, be sure to grab Amplitude, Siphoner, Leech, and Perception. Despite the damage per second not being that high on the card, it does surprisingly well against bosses. Any fight with waves of adds are swiftly dealt with, especially with Way of Keola's Lightning Bolts. Even if we didn't have the bug to abuse, the skill's cooldown when at the cap is only 18 seconds. Sapphire Dreamstone or Short Circuit could easily make that brief period even shorter. Always make sure to do that refund trick before entering boss fights or after respawning, and don't be afraid to just spam dodge. The damage isn't as high as it used to be, but having unlimited uptime makes repeatedly blinking a legitimate option for close range encounters. There does seem to be some targeting issues with the tendrils when aiming at targets above you that are on a ledge. Despite having 15 meters of range, I had a difficult time consistently hitting Gwendol. I had to keep fidgeting around and adjusting my aim constantly to actually shock her. There's also a small issue of not being able to blink up climbable ledges when using the skill. It's not a huge problem, but it can definitely screw you out of your skill's duration if you end up falling into an unfavorable spot. Other than those issues, Havoc Form is an incredibly fun skill. I do kind of wish it had a shorter base cooldown though. Archon is one of the strongest archetypes in Remnant 2. Its ability to boost mods so tremendously places it far above many of the other class options in the roster. It's definitely not as overpowered as it used to be, but it still manages to wipe the floor with the opposition. Whether you want to supercharge your mods, or just become a god of lightning, the Archon is shockingly powerful.
I am going to end this, once and for all.
You can't. He must stand trial.
He has control of the Senate and the courts. He's too dangerous to be left alive.
I'm too weak. Oh, don't kill me, please.
It's not the Jedi way. He must live.
Please don't.
I need him.